Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation. Tonight, we are joined by Montgomery County native and historian Ralph Buglis as he shares with us the history of the remaining 1- and 2-room schoolhouses in Montgomery County. Reminder, please remain muted during the presentation. You can send any questions you have throughout in the chat, and as always, there will be an opportunity at the end to unmute for a Q&A. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, please make sure to check out our website and register to join us again next week. Without further ado, Ralph, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Dottie. I would like to be able to launch right into a joke, but the joke's on me because I can't seem to do two things at once. That is, share my screen and be witty at the same time. Okay, I think I've got it here. I hope you're seeing the title screen, Poolsville area schools. Here we go. So a lame attempt at humor. I aspired to be the Kenny Scholes of schools. Kenny, regular for Poolsville seniors, talks about old Poolsville homes. Talks are absolutely great, and I hope that this one about schools comes close. So what you're seeing in the background there is a map from around 1910, from a amazing report that we have. Actually, it was done by the federal government of Montgomery County, but it shows the existing schools, mostly one-room schools at that time. 1910 was sort of the peak years of the one-room school era. As Dottie said, also talk about some two-room schools. Sometimes they started one-room schools and then got added on to, and one 4-room school that's very important in Poolsville's history. So here is an enlargement of just the western part of the county, that map section that I showed earlier on the left, so you can see it a little better. Now, the first thing you should notice is that it's broken out into schools for white children and schools for Black children. So we are going back to the days of segregated education in our county. And I'll give a little bit of the history of public education in our county as we go along and fit that in. As I said, mainly one-room schools, some 2-room schools, and one 4-room school. So we're really talking about the period from around the end of the Civil War to just before the beginning of World War II, but mainly the last half of the 19th century, early years of the 20th century. So let me try to make some sense of this map for you. The schools that are still standing in the area are 3 schools that were segregated for African American students. I hope you know them. To the west of Poolesville, Martinsburg, actually a little north of Poolsville, you know it as the beauty spot, and then the Boyd's Negro School, as it's called, to reflect its time period, and it's a school museum. Also still standing are 3 old schools, happen to be all for white children, and they are now residences. And so we'll take a look at those. It's Barnesville, Dawsonville, and Seneca. Now I'll make a note here about Seneca in just a moment. 2 schools are in ruins. You can't really see them this time of year because of the leaves being out on the trees, but you can in winter. It's the old Elmer School and Pools Track School. I just love that name, so rural sounding. And possibly still standing. And I'm hoping maybe someone can help me on this, give me some information. The Martinsburg School for White Children, it was also called the Marble Quarry School. Now, I mentioned Seneca down here at the bottom of the map. You see 2 Seneca schools, a white school and a Black school. Actually 3 Seneca schools. What you're not seeing on the map, because it was no longer used as a school by this point, is probably the best known one. I'll show it in just a minute. And you also see two Sugarland schools. Now we think, let me back up here. That's that's obviously the Seneca school I was going to talk about in just a moment. But back to Sugarland now. We think of Sugarland as the historically African-American community with the wonderfully restored St. Paul's Community Church. But Sugarland referred really to a large area around Poolesville. And there was both a Sugarland school for white children and a Sugarland school for Black children. So now back to Seneca. This obviously is probably the best known old one-room school in the area, and it's a gem. It goes back to about 1864, built of red Seneca sandstone that was quarried nearby, the same material used in the Smithsonian Castle down on the mall. This has been wonderfully restored and tended to by Historic Medley District, based right in Poolsville. And wanted to mention in particular that this school is going to be open at the end of the month, last weekend in June, which is traditionally Heritage Montgomery weekend. And a lot of historic sites all around the county are open for free. Some of them both Saturday and Sunday, some just Saturday, some just Sunday. And of course, they haven't been able to hold this wonderful event the past 2 years, but it is scheduled again for this year. So I encourage you to mark your calendar. Here's a photograph, maybe you've seen it, of the Seneca Stone School. You see a whole range of ages here. I initially thought this was the teacher here, but actually the teacher's sort of hiding here right in the doorway. So you see, as I said, a whole range of ages, generally one-room schools. It was grades 1 through 7, no kindergarten yet. And 7th was really the highest grade. So you had this wide range of ages, all grades together in one small room with one teacher. And sometimes even older students, if the teacher consented, they might get a little extra work beyond grade 7, or remember, these were mainly farm kids, so often they would take more than 1 year to finish up a grade because they would miss so many days to help out on the farm. Here's a look inside the Seneca School. If you are not able to get there last weekend in June, above the blackboard there in the front, the chalkboard, I should say, slate board, is a wonderful map of Maryland. That alone is worth going to see, I think. And this is a wonderful photo by a friend of mine, Dan Potter, who sort of specializes in gorgeous photos of old one-room schools. You might be interested in checking out his website, www.danielspotter.com. So the next one I want to mention is the so-called Poolsville Colored School. Well, let me back up for just a moment to Seneca. It actually predates public education, but very soon became a public school. That is, it was started by the community, and you had to pay to go there, sort of sometimes just if you supplied firewood or things like that. And this was just about the time that public education was finally getting going in the state of Maryland. There had been some earlier attempts, but with a new state constitution in 1864, finally it set up county by county, the system that we have today, requiring public schools for children. But at that point, only for white children. So that same constitution abolished slavery in Maryland, but the Constitution really made no provision for education of the children of the newly emancipated. So the communities that formed of African Americans all around the county after the Civil War and after emancipation here in Maryland, and just a parenthetical note, that new Constitution, November 1864, gave Maryland the distinction of being the first state south of the Mason-Dixon line to, on its own, abolish slavery. So, as I said, the communities, the Black communities that formed really banded together to provide education for their kids. And this was the school in Poolesville for the Black community. And it met here in the building behind it, which was called the Love and Charity Hall. That was essentially a benevolent association building. Benevolent associations were an important community institution, along with churches and along with schools, that came about quite soon in the African-American communities. Benevolent societies provided things like burial insurance or help for watching out for orphans, things that insurance and things like that, support system that was not otherwise available in a very segregated society. Now, importantly, this building was built with some help, it's not entirely clear, from the Freedmen's Bureau, which was the federal agency set up after the Civil War to help the newly enslaved adjust to a whole new way of life. And it operated here in Maryland, in fact, had an office right in Montgomery County. You see the stationery here. Its formal name, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, and the office in Rockville for Montgomery County. In any event, the Bureau did help supply a teacher for this school, and it opened 1869, about 5 years after emancipation. It was located sort of on that small hill behind what was formerly Elijah Methodist Church. I'm not sure if a congregation is meeting there now. If you can tell me at the end, I would very much like to know. The next school I want to talk about is the old Martinsburg School. This I'm sure you're familiar with. This is the old African-American community of Martinsburg, west of Poolesville along White's Ferry Road. To not much of a community there anymore. It's now called the Warren Historic Site, and it is very historic. Warren for the Warren Methodist Church that you see, no longer active either. It has combined with Elijah and a couple of others and is the West Montgomery Methodist Church. But the school there is on the left, and the community actually formed a little further away right after the Civil War. And the first church was built 1869. It was located up Martinsburg Road. And the photo here is this second star right along White's Ferry Road. If you're familiar with the area, there is a cemetery up at the Upper Star area. And that's where the community formed the first church, and school met in the church as early as 1869. Then the church was actually moved to this spot, and this is a later building of the church. And then a school met in the church, and then finally, when the county began providing public schools for Black children, this was required beginning in 1872, so that was 8 years after the formal beginning of public education with that new constitution. So this school was built by the county, and then back behind it, that school built 1886. And back behind it is, again, another Benevolent Society building. First was called Love and Charity Hall. This is often called the Loving Charity Hall. I'm not sure whether it's just sort of a derivation of the same organization or not. But as I said, this is a very historic site. It's believed to be the only site in Maryland where all three of these very important Black community institutions still stand all together. And the Benevolent Society building was several years ago recently nicely restored like this after nearly falling down. You probably drove by it many times, as I did, and seeing it in such awful condition. This site will also be opened Heritage Weekend. It's a wonderful opportunity to get to see all of these buildings. It will be open only on the Saturday of that weekend, June 25th. And I'll at the end tell you how you can get more information. So that had an early school too, meeting in the church. And again, the Freedmen's Bureau may have helped in providing a teacher, at least initially before the county started administering the school. Now, another community, this map is hard to read. It's an 1879 map. For one thing, north is not at the top. Maps in those days didn't always have north at the top, so I put the direction for north there. But this is between Barnesville and Bellsville. This is essentially Route 109 here. And so this shows a schoolhouse, Black schoolhouse, another Black community that formed right after the Civil War. Essentially gave rise to the area known as Big Woods today. The community founder of the church was a Reverend E. Awkard, A-W-K-A-R-D. School later moved as a county school to this spot, and I'll show you that coming up. And you see again, nearby White School. Editorial comment, talk about no cost efficiency. The county running separate schools located very close to each other back in the days of segregation. But of course, this was the situation throughout the segregated South. So again, the schoolhouse there that I'm showing was actually a sort of general community meeting house, also served as a church as well. And again, some assistance here from the Freedmen's Bureau. So after it became a county school, a new building was built. It's hard to, this is the, what I would call the first new building, pretty old, obviously. This photo is from about 1960s. And then a larger two-room school was built next to the building. And so this was the Selman Colored School, and a quite rare 3-room school in those days, still using the original county school building here that you see in the background. This spot is right next to the church I mentioned earlier, the West Montgomery Methodist Church, which is a merger of Elijah, Warren, the original church here, Mount Zion, and I think one other. So the little school that you see in the back there opened 1894. That community school had still been continuing, meeting in the church. And this school closed in 1936. Okay, next, still African-American school that I want to talk about is the Sugarland Colored School. It was, well, this community started a little later than the others I've mentioned thus far. The first church in Sugarland was about 1871. And again, a school met in the church, and then the community built a school building, not the one that I'm showing here. This was a later school building, one-room school. And excuse me for just, I need to get something out of the way here. I'm not going to be able to. Okay, there we go. So a one-room school was built in the early 1880s, and then it was replaced by this school about in the 1920s, 1924. And most importantly, this was a Rosenwald school. So let me get off on a little sort of sidebar here about the importance of Rosenwald schools. They were so named for this man, Julius Rosenwald, a philanthropist in the early 20th century. He was also the president of Sears Roebuck. That was back in the days of the Sears catalog. Sears was the Amazon of its time. He was quite wealthy. He formed a partnership with Booker T. Washington, the president of then Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, now Tuskegee University, a historically African-American university, educational institution, like Howard, like Fisk, and some others. And so through that partnership, Julius Rosenwald partially funded the construction of schools, still segregated, but public schools. They were then run by the generally the counties where they were located. About 5,000 ultimately built by the 1930s throughout the segregated South. To give you an idea of their significance, after they were all built, 1 of every 3 African-American children attended a Rosenwald school, including such notables as the late Congressman John Lewis. Here you see the northernmost reach of the Rosenwald schools was right here in Maryland. There were once about 160 Rosenwald schools in Maryland. In Montgomery County, we had 17, including the Sugarland school that I just showed you. And in contrast to the rest of the South, after all those 17 were built in our county, all in the 1920s, 2 of every 3 African-American students in Montgomery County attended a Rosenwald school. And so this school was eventually replaced also by a Rosenwald school. As I said, you know it as the Poolesville beauty spot today. It's a highway maintenance facility also. It doesn't look much like a school, but have you ever gone around back? You see large windows, a bank of them, typical of a Rosenwald school. In fact, here's many of them in our county were built according to the same architectural plan. This is not this particular school, it's another one in our county, but you see it was just identical. So the 17, here they are all located around the county in the Poolsville area, just the 2 I've mentioned so far, Poolsville and Sugarland. 5 are still standing, not only the Poolsville School, but 4 others in the eastern part of the county. The best restored one is the Smithville School, built again according to the same plan. It's been restored by members of Alpha Phi Alpha, the oldest Black fraternity in the country. This was the Montgomery County chapter. Many of the members had attended this school. And this one also is going to be open Heritage Montgomery weekend, rare opportunity to see this school. There are some school artifacts inside. It's mainly used as a meeting space for the fraternity chapter. And again, built in the same style of the others. So it's not, and as they say, architecturally authentic restoration, but it is the best restored one in our county. And the one in Poolesville actually has, it's the only one that still has a bank of those telltale windows. And if you were paying attention when I showed the Selman School, it sure looks like a Rosenwald school, but it was built after the time period and was not built with any money from the Rosenwald Fund. That had dried up by that point. But the county, obviously saving money, just used architectural plans that they had on hand, and similar to other Black schools around the county when they built an addition here for the Selman School. So just to recap, those are 4 African-American schools I've talked about. Next would be the Boyd School, again, very well known, I hope. It is a school museum today. It came along a little later The county built this in 1895. Again, nicely restored inside, so you get a sense of what schooling was like back in those days. So very different. Holes in the desks, not for computer cables, but for the inkwells, for example. But this school, a little different than the Seneca Stone School, because in the African-American schools, academics were very much stressed, but also taught were vocational skills, because job opportunities would be so limited in a segregated society. So girls were taught sewing skills and other skills that they would by and large need to be domestics. And the boys taught manual labor skills. So there are examples of old tools at this school as well. Supposedly separate but equal, but nothing equal about them here in Montgomery County as elsewhere. Here, the black schools had far more students, very overcrowded. They got used books from the white schools, inadequate supplies. The teachers paid much less, black teachers in the black schools, white teachers in the white schools, and a shorter school year to begin with. The budgets were completely separate, never enough money for the black schools. And so when the budget ran out, the schools would close early in the school year. One case, something like 1905, the black schools closed as early as March. So this is a school museum today. It's typically open the third Sunday of the months April through November, but it also will be open both days of Heritage Montgomery weekend. So let's see, next would be down here at the bottom, the Seneca Colored School, as it was called. Nothing left of it today. It was located on Violet's Lock Road as you head down toward the lock along the canal. There is a small cemetery there of the Seneca Community Church, but there was a school and a church located in that spot also. The church later moved and renamed. It's up on Berryville Road as the Seneca Community Church. But this school, we have records showing that the county assigned a teacher as early as 1880, probably the school meeting in the church, and then a school building probably around 1915. We don't have really definitive records, but it did close in 1937. So let's just go a little ways away again to Berryville Road and talk now about the second Seneca School for white children. This is, I think, less well known. And here it is. It's a residence, part of a residence today along Berryville Road, very handsome stone house. But this portion right here is the second Seneca School for white children. It essentially replaced the Seneca Stone School when it was considered too small. A wood frame building like so many of the old one-room schools. You can see sort of still that side entryway is still there. It was a school between 1900 and 1931. A photograph of this school, there you see Seneca School, a wood building, not the stone schoolhouse. This is the later one. And interesting story about this is that this little girl, after she grew up and the school was no longer a school, was sold, she bought it, and eventually it became the large house that it is today. This is a wonderful story in this wonderful book, Montgomery County, A Pictorial History by the late Margaret Coleman. Okay, another school that is a residence today. You've probably driven by this, don't know if you knew it was a school. The Dawsonville School, it's on Whites Ferry Road, the other end of Whites Ferry, not the ferry end of it, but where it comes out at Route 28. One-room school, three windows there on the side. They would have been larger windows when it was a school. And it can be a house today with a second story. Generally, as a school, the room was 12 feet in height. So generally in a house, rooms are 8 feet high. And so you can tuck a second story up there under the roof. It was a school from 1894 to 1923. And I love the fact that there's a swing set out in the front, because you'll see another old school with a swing set. Another old school that is a home today, the Barnesville two-room school. It was built as a two-room school, 1896, and then continued up until 1939. This house has gone under some renovation. I haven't seen it recently, so this is an older picture of it that I took some years ago. So I don't know how extensive the changes have been. These old schools are not protected in any way, so an owner can change the building as they want. So those are the three that are residences today: Barnesville, Dawsonville, and the second Seneca School for white children. A little south of Barnesville was the Buck Lodge one-room school, no longer standing. I'll show you a picture in just a moment. Few of these others still stand. The Oakland School, probably have never even heard of it. The Sugarland School for white children. And this one had me perplexed for a while, because I sort of thought the Sugarland White School should be the Oakland School there, since it's so close to the Sugarland community. But as I said, Sugarland encompassed a large area. And records have shown that the other one there, closer to Poolsville itself, it was the old Sugarland White School. No, nothing left of it. Nothing left of the old Monocacy School. It was right about where Route 28, the flashing light is, and makes that sharp bend up toward Dickerson. So here is a photograph, only photograph of those schools, no longer still standing, that we have. This is the Buck Lodge School, and there is that swing set out front that I mentioned. So let's see, we're now up to the schools that are only barely still standing in ruins. Pools Track School. Here it is. What you can see of it when there aren't leaves on all the trees there. It's at the end of Barnesville Road, where it meets Mount Ephraim Road. 1876, closed in 1931. It started out as a one-room school, and then you can see that white plywood. That was the door then to a second room that was added on. And out in front, there is a quite large tree now. I like to think that maybe it was planted during an Arbor Day celebration. Arbor Day was a kind of a big deal back in the one-room school era. A dear little tree that we plant today, what will you be when we're old and gray? Dropping down here, my leaves shall whisper merrily a tale of the children who planted me. So I hope that that's sort of what we're doing today, remembering these old schools. Here's a little earlier photo, but still after the school had closed. You see the pump, no running water in these old schools, and generally heated by wood-burning stoves, and obviously no bathrooms. Outhouses took care of things. So Pools Track, also the Elmer School, barely still standing. Here it is, hard to make out. Falling down. This is several years ago, so I'm actually not quite sure of the condition now, but I did get out there after a snowfall, so you can see some contrast there, and see that's the window there and then a door next to it. And indeed, here's a photo of the school when it was in much better shape, 1910 to 1930. Here's another look at it, and you see some metal here. That was the what was called the wainscoting inside the building, and this in another school, it still stands in Little Bennett Park, the old Kingsley School. It's a wooden wainscoting here, but the records do show that in the Elmer School, it had metal wainscoting. That was along, well, Elmer School Road did lead toward it. Some names of roads still evoke these old schools. It's actually located along Club Hollow Road, where it comes at an end at Elmer School Road. And the Pools Track School, as I said, at the end of Barnesville Road, where it meets Mount Ephraim. But really hard to see this time of year. So as I said, some roads have a school name in them, and indeed Dickerson School Road led to the Dickerson School, a two-room brick building that was in what is now Dickerson Park, nothing left of it. The Monocacy School, when it closed, the kids went to the Dickerson School, the newer school that you see located not too far away. And then later when Pools Track closed, those kids went to the Dickerson School also. One other school, it's not even on the map because it had closed by the time the map was made, but there may just be the foundation of it. I don't really want to reveal exactly where it is, but it's near the Isaac Walton property along West Willard Road, named for the Horsepen Branch, the little creek that is a tributary of the Potomac. And about the Martinsburg's school for white children, also called the Marble Quarry School, I don't think it still stands, but this house at 19200 Martinsburg Road, maybe the owner is even here tonight. Look at the addition there in the back. Three equally spaced windows, rather tall. These one-room schools were moved around a lot after they were sold, especially, I don't know, maybe that could be an old school, maybe the Marble Quarry School. I would love to find out. Marble Quarry, for the quarry nearby, that you'll learn about if you tune in June 21st. Poolesville Seniors is hosting again Paul Kreingold, who has tracked down that quarry and gives a wonderful talk about Marble Quarry. It's not marble at all, but here it is in its polished state. These are the columns in Statuary Hall in the US Capitol, from stone quarried just a little off the canal near Poolesville. So the four-room school I want to mention a little later in time. It opened 1911 as an elementary school. Schools were growing bigger by that point with increasing population. It later added high school grades, so that's why you see it there as Poolsville High School. And Poolsville High School is actually the fourth oldest high school in our county that's still around. Others have come and gone. So if we were in person, this would be a little pop quiz. The oldest is Richard Montgomery. It actually opened as Montgomery County High School, the only one in the county in Rockville. Later became Richard Montgomery. Gaithersburg is the second oldest. And all these transplants down county, I live in Rockville. Think Bethesda Chevy Chase is an old school because it's a rather old, part of it is a rather old building now, but it came along later. The third high school was Sherwood, and then Poolesville was the fourth oldest high school. As I said, others had come along, but closed in the interim. But there's going to be a brand new Poolesville High School. Groundbreaking is just a few days away. Here's what it's going to look like. It's a upgrade of the existing building plus new additions, also a total revamp, as you can see. And school buses out front. Wanted to mention that Poolesville has the distinction of having the first school bus in the county, the first dedicated school bus, horse-drawn carriage. Now, a lot of times farmers would take their kids and others to school this way, but this was the first sort of official school bus in the county to bring kids from further away to that 4-room Poolsville Elementary School, later high school. And a note about one other 1-room school, a little out of the area, but the old Comus 1-room school, sort of diagonally across from the Comus Inn, Comus Restaurant, was moved in 1938 to Poolsville High School, became the home economics classroom. Here's the very first school in Poolsville. Not a very good picture, but this is before public education, 1841. And so probably essentially a private school, tuition charging in one form or another, not what we think of as a common school, public school open to everyone yet at that point. So that is a run through of the Poolsville area schools that I know of. I'd love to hear about any reminiscences or information that other people have. I'll leave this slide up, but here's the whole map that I showed at the beginning. So I've tracked down all these schools all around the county, wrote about it in a publication for Montgomery History. I'm a volunteer at Montgomery History, founded as the Montgomery County Historical Society 3/4 of a century ago. Shortened our name to Montgomery History to be a little more hip and now. But you can find this if you're interested at Montgomery History's website. And Heritage Days that I mentioned, sponsored by Heritage Montgomery, a different organization. Saturday and Sunday, June 25th and 26th. You can find out all the details at heritagemontgomery.org. So I'll leave this up and open it up to questions. But having this on the screen, I think Dottie might be a good reference point.
Yes, feel free to either unmute and ask questions or leave them in the chat at this time. And I also wanted to point out that I went ahead and put links in the chat for both of our next upcoming in-person events, both the Sally Ride event that I mentioned, as well as the Paul Kreingold event, The Lost History of Potomac Marble, which Ralph mentioned.
And I've seen Ann Jung do a recreation of Clara Barton, and she is fabulous. She's going to be doing Sally Ride, right?
Yes, she's going to be doing Sally Ride. And I'm also just about to put the Historic Medley District website link in the chat as well.
Yeah, they'll be the ones that open up the Seneca Stone Schoolhouse. I didn't mention, but it's mostly open for school groups to come in. So generally not open to the public, but so this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I thought it was cool to learn more about the history as well. When I was in middle school in Poolesville, I actually volunteered and earned SSL hours by doing, school reenactments at the 1-room Seneca Schoolhouse. But of course, being middle schoolers, we didn't learn as in depth about the history as I would have liked. So it was cool to hear more about that building as well as some of the other ones.
Glad I was able to fill in some blanks. Hello. Let me see, I'll check the chat.
And feel free to just unmute and ask any questions you have as well.
Hi, Ralph. It's Julie.
Julie, hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
I was wondering about the Oakland School.
Julie is one of the teachers at the Seneca Stone Schoolhouse.
Oh,
Can I reveal that? I guess
yes.
I just did. I guess I just did.
We've been very busy at the schoolhouse this spring. But I was wondering about the Oakland School that you mentioned, because I'd never heard of it until I was talking to Jane Sween a few weeks ago about Alice Darby, who I portray at the schoolhouse.
Mhm.
And she had mentioned that Alice, after she went to Seneca School, she went to this Oakland School, and I had never heard of it, and neither had Knight. And I wondered if you knew anything about that.
I know hardly anything more than that I have pinned down that location after thinking that location for a long time was the Sugarland School for white kids. There's an unpublished manuscript. It's in and Knight Kiplinger probably knows about it too. It's in the reference section at the Rockville Library. It's called Schools That Were. It was written by the former principal of Damascus High School, among other places, E. Guy Jewell.
Oh, yes, he mentioned that quite a bit.
Don't know much more other than the dates and the location for it.
So where it was located on Sugarland Road?
No, it would be along Partnership Road, sort of between River Road and Sugarland Road.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we had never heard of it, ever.
From the, and this map is not exact, but from where it's on this map, I would say almost opposite, the polo field.
Right. We'll have to go exploring back in there.
Yes, if you find anything, I'd love to know.
Okay, interesting, as I want to talk to Jane again and see if she has any more information about it, but I was too busy writing notes down when I was talking to her on the phone.
I know how that is. Wonderful to quote unquote see you, Julie.
How are things at your schoolhouse?
We'd not been open for several years, as you know, so it's gearing up again.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be open Saturday and Sunday for Heritage Days at the Seneca Schoolhouse.
Yes, and I hope a lot of people come by.
I hope so. Hopefully it's not as hot as it has been there.
And I can appreciate that in your period close, it probably feels worse.
Yes.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm hoping for some memories, or just as you drove by Dawsonville, that small house, did you know that was a school?
I did.
I see a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay. Where was the Elijah School? That was the first community school that in the Benevolent Society building. That building stood just a little behind the former Elijah Methodist Church on 109, just heading north out of Poolsville. And I think another congregation was there for a while, but I don't know if they still are. If anyone knows, let me know. Marble School was thought wasn't completed. Jim, if you want to unmute, love to know anything more about that.
The Marble School was on the sort of the S curves as you're coming out of Martinsburg, going down Martinsburg Road.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably on the second one. It was right on the curve, and it was used as a tenant house. And the guy who owned it back in the late 70s decided he didn't want to deal with it anymore, so he had it torn down.
But it was torn down. That's what I've read.
Yeah, but it looked like the one in Elmer.
Ah, okay, thank you.
And all my family went to it. Matter of fact, my great-great-grandfather Benjamin R. and his son John Elgin were trustees of that school.
Yes, I should have mentioned when I showed the picture of, maybe I can go back here. Um, uh, Generally, there was a school board then, but it was you couldn't just dash out to a school. So these schools all had usually 3 trustees that were really sort of surrogate school boards that officially ran the school. So let me back up here to the Poolsville School, what we were just talking about, behind Elijah Church. And you see, this was the teacher, but these were 2 of the trustees. You see 3 men here among all the children. So yes, these old schools were generally had about 3 trustees in charge of them.
And the Sugarland School whites still exist. It's on I can't think of the name of the road. So it's where Mount Nebo joins on the road that goes to Edwards Ferry.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah, it's a house now.
Okay. I've
And
driven by.
it's you take that as you're coming straight, just before you get to the Jesse Veer's farm. It sits right there where the old log cabins are, or one of the log cabins is still standing. But it's a residence just up road from it, on that curve, right on the curve.
Okay, thank you.
All my kin went to that, all Edwards Ferry group, all the bells. And also,
go ahead.
I have researched that when the Yankees came to Poolesville, they took over the town hall. The town hall back then was a double 2-story building, and on the upper floor was a school. I don't know if it was a public school or a private school, but it was a school.
Okay, so this would have been obviously Civil War. So yes, that's right about the time that was that in-between time before public schooling really started to take hold. Thank you.
I see a couple more questions in the chat as well.
Okay. There's an old private school on the property of Montevideo. Julie can probably fill us in on that if you know anything. Darnstown Academy. Yes, a little, I don't know, I consider a little beyond the Poolsville area. Darnstown Academy, academies predated public education. So they were essentially private schools. One existed in Darnstown, one existed in Rockville, the Rockville Academy, Brookville Academy, others that I'm just not thinking of. Andrew Small Academy. No, that was the Andrew Small Academy, I think was actually the name of the one in Darnstown. And Sherwood Academy. And it was eventually incorporated into the public school system. And it's both Sherwood Elementary today and Sherwood High School. Do you have any information about the one-room schoolhouse that Black children attended in Jerusalem? I don't know of a one-room schoolhouse in Jerusalem. May have been in one of the churches, because this would have been, I think, before the Rosenwald School was built there, the so-called beauty spot.
Yes.
So it was a bit of a hike to get from Jerusalem to this school still being used that you see the picture of here. There was a school on the other side of 28, wow, I should have included that one. It wasn't open for very long. It was along Peachtree Road,
Yes.
and it was called Old Union, I think.
Yes.
It
Yes.
met in a Benevolent Society building, which was the only building for that community. I don't think there was a church there or a school building, but there was for a short time a school there.
Where on
saying yes,
Peachtree Road was that? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. It's a little beyond it's a little beyond the farm, and I can't think of the name of the farm, but it's on the other side of the road, the orchard farm there.
Yeah, Lewis Orchards.
Yes. Well, not
Okay.
Lewis. There's
Oh, there's Kingsbury.
Kings, right.
Kingsbury.
It's a little beyond,
Kingsbury.
it's near the entrance to Kingsbury.
Mhm.
And there's sort of a cluster of homes there. And I think that might be the remnant of that community. I don't know for sure. Any information about Briarley Hall? Briarley Hall, formerly a boys' school, then open to all, located along 109 next to Chiswell's Inheritance. You're putting me to shame. I feel like I'm sort of an interloper with so much knowledge here among many
Locals.
Poolsville natives. So,
Yeah, locals.
so I don't know about that, but if you want to send me some information, I should put my email in the chat as well. I'm happy to get
Yes.
queries or, and again,
Ralph?
I can't do two things at once. Yes.
Ralph, the one-room schoolhouse on Montevideo's property was the private school for the Peter children.
For the kids.
They
yeah,
had
okay.
they had a tutor, Reverend Charles Nurse for one, that came and taught the Peter children in the one-room schoolhouse that's on the property there.
Okay, and that was somewhat typical of wealthy families. They would have a tutor, because again, this is before the days of wide-ranging public education. Education pretty much limited to the wealthy, who could either pay for an academy or pay for a private tutor.
And
So
it's
there's my
very well kept. I mean, as you can imagine, it's in tip-top shape. It has benches in there. It has a schoolmaster's desk.
Oh,
So-
wow.
Quite nice.
Ah, if you ever want to invite me, I'm I'm ready.
I'll pass on the word.
How's that for inviting yourself? So there's my email address if anyone wants to add anything. Let me make sure I've gone through questions here. Anyone want to throw anything else into the pot?
If we have any last questions,
Yeah, I
feel
guess
free
we're a
to
little over
unmute or
here.
leave them in the chat below.
Well, thank you all very much. And hope
We'd
you
like to
can
thank you.
get out to Heritage Days, see some of the spots, not only in the western part of the county, but venture down here as well.
Mhm.
One that I want to get to is I mentioned Brookville Academy, but there is also a newly restored one-room schoolhouse in Brookville. It's at the end of a little road, but it's going to be open, I think, for practically the first time on Heritage Days also. So Heritage Montgomery has a brochure with all the sites that you can download or probably see around town somewhere.
There's also the one-room schoolhouse, or two of them at Sugarloaf Mountain. Are they ever open for Heritage Days?
No, I have never known those to be open, and they're on my list also. They are, and I think I gave a talk about Sugarloaf for Poolsville seniors. Again, a white school and a black school.
Right.
The white school is right as you start to drive up the mountain. It was, boy, you're testing my memory here. It was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was once it's actually in, both of those are actually in Frederick County now. But
Okay.
the white school was right on the sort of on the line. It was in Montgomery County and it was moved. It's if you peek in the windows, it's mostly being used for storage. The other school is a gem. It's along.
Yes, I'm dying to go inside of it.
I am too. It's along Mount Ephraim Road after it turns into a gravel road.
Mhm.
It was for Black kids. It was specifically built by Gordon Strong, who owned the mountain, for the Black community. And he spared no expense. He would supplement the budget. It's a gorgeous school. It's shuttered now, but
Yeah.
wish it were open sometime.
Me too.
Julie, if either of us ever learn of it being open, we'll contact each other. And
Okay.
And I
Thank
would like to point out just one last time all of the resources in the chat. I put the links to our upcoming in-person events. I also just put the link to Ralph's Sugarloaf history presentation on YouTube that he did with us. It's absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend you check it out if you enjoyed tonight's presentation. I also saw a couple links from Glenn Wallace with really cool historical photos from Barley Hall and Poolsville High School. So be sure to check those out. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's presentation as much as I did and learned something new. As always, if you think of any questions later, you can email us at info@poolsvilleseniors.org or Ralph's email, which he also dropped in the chat. If you'd like to unmute or turn on your camera to say goodbye, now's the time. And we'd like to thank Ralph for his presentation, as well as tonight's sponsor, the Robert A. Pumphrey Funeral Homes, for helping us keep our programs going because we love putting them on for you. If you enjoyed
I'd like to
tonight's
thank
program,
those who provided additional information. I learned also. Thank you.
yes, thank you so much. I think it makes our presentation so much more interesting and engaging when people get together and share the local history, because so much of that is passed along from word of mouth. As always, you can find more information for our events at poolsvilleseniors.org. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight and sharing some of your pieces of history.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Have a nice evening.
Take care.
They do.